Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the PhinManiacs.com podcast. I am your host, Louis Sung, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Chad Ronnebaum, and our featured third host. I guess we should just call it third host at this point. It's like my two co-hosts, Chad Ronnebaum and Ian Berger. Gentlemen, good to have you back again. Let's ready to talk some Dolphins. We got plenty to go through. So,
just a little bit going on, right, Louis?
Yeah, just a little bit. So, last time we talked about what we thought would happen in the draft, what we had hoped would happen in the draft. I don't know I can't remember what exactly everybody else's predictions were, but I knew what mine was, and mine was completely and utterly wrong. In fact, not only did Greedy Williams not get drafted in the first round at all, he was like the sixth cornerback off the board, if I remember correctly. So that was a shocker for me. The Browns picked him up, so that Browns team is even more loaded than it was before, but I digress. So we're going to talk about what the Dolphins did in the draft. We're going to talk about the things that they kind of, sort of did in the draft by proxy. And we're going to talk about what they did after the draft and what they could still do. So plenty of roster moves to talk about. Let's go ahead and jump right in. We're going to talk about the most important thing that happened during that whole draft process. Everybody knows what it is. Everybody's been talking about it. The Dolphins drafted a fullback in the 7th round. Can you believe it, guys?
I love it. Love the fullback, man.
All right, for real though, I'm sure we'll get to Chandler Cox soon, but for real though, Josh Rosen, Dolphins traded back in the 2nd round to go ahead and get themselves an extra 2nd rounder from the New Orleans Saints for next year, and they then used that 2nd round pick that they picked up by trading back in the first place to trade with the Arizona Cardinals to get their hands on Josh Rosen. And quite frankly, everybody knows I was against the move for less than football reasons. I had made it clear that my issue with Rosen was not as a football player, it was more other issues, but I've since changed my stance on that. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt, and so far he's doing an excellent job of proving my initial suspicions wrong. Hopefully he continues down that path, and the only thing I would have said at this point now is that I wish the Dolphins had not caved and given them a 2nd round pick. There was still a lot of good talent in the 2nd round available, but all in all, considering what Rosen could be, what he could potentially be, I guess it wasn't the worst move in the world, just because I know that a quarterback is the most important thing on the field. There's no denying that at this point. But I'll just go ahead and let you guys do the talking from this point on. Josh Rosen, gentlemen, have at it.
I guess you want to go ahead and start, Louis?
Go for it.
To me, it's a first ever. In all the years I've been watching football for offseason, I've never seen anything like it. I mean, Josh Rosen obviously was the 10th overall pick last year, and he clearly was, going into last year, one of the top quarterbacks. Some people had him all the way up to 1, other people had him a little lower, but he clearly was a very talented, high upside potential franchise quarterback. And to 1 year later give him up for what the Cardinals did for what amounts to peanuts and pay like 70% of his salary is unheard of. It's just never really been done before. And so that alone is just, to me, is stunning. So I've heard a lot, and right after it, I heard a lot of it. Like, I think people had this conception that Miami could have gotten a better deal for him, but Miami really did get a better deal for him because everything I've heard, everything you got to take is a little bit rumor-based. Nobody knows for sure the facts of how it all played out. But what I was told is that the Cardinals did not actually attempt to trade Josh Rosen until after the draft had started, which was a huge mistake on their part, in my opinion. I think they mishandled the situation, which ended up being to the Dolphins' advantage, because I honestly think if you put Josh Rosen on the market in March and say, he's available, give us your best offer, I think they get a 1st-round pick for him. I really do. Because the Redskins don't know who they're going to get. The Giants don't know who they're going to get. And it gives teams time to figure out how they want to handle that situation. Once the draft has started, that's the equivalent of you've got money in your pocket and you're out on a new car lot and you're looking at a car you're about to buy, and somebody walking across the street and saying, hey, I've got a car over here that only has a couple thousand miles on it that's just like new. do you want this one? And at that point, you're coming in pretty late to try to sway them. And so the Cardinals had lost a lot of leverage. And I think Miami did identify that, because everything I heard was when they went into the draft, the Cardinals were trying to get a first-round pick all the way through the first round.
Yeah, that wasn't going to happen. Well,
at that point, it wasn't going to happen because they'd waited too long. I mean, it wasn't realistic anymore at that point for the Cardinals. And then when we got to the second round, I think the Dolphins had identified that. That's why they made that trade, because they realized that I don't think they're going to get a second round offer for Josh Rosen. I think that's what Miami had interpreted. But you're starting to play with fire, because Ryan Fitzpatrick, if you go through 2019 and you start Ryan Fitzpatrick all year long, to me, you're wasting a full season. You gain so much more by having a young quarterback in there, developing them. Even if he doesn't end up being a franchise guy, at least you're attempting to get a franchise quarterback, or at the least getting a young quarterback that can at least maybe be a really good, backup or a serviceable quarterback. You can't start a 36-year-old quarterback all year. And so Miami starts to really play with fire, because they passed on Dwayne Haskins in the draft, and now you've gotten all the way to the end of the second round. And I'm fairly confident on my side that the New England Patriots, the San Diego Chargers, some of these teams maybe would be starting to really, really consider the value of getting a quarterback that's 22 years old, with the pedigree and the ability that Josh Rosen had. It starts to become a no-brainer just for those teams to give up their third-round pick and just get him and put him on the bench behind their starters as their future guy. And so I think Miami did everything they could do to get value out of the situation. So they traded to the end of the second round, which I think was brilliant from Chris Greer, to go from the front end of the second to the back end of the second, gain another second round pick next year, and still get Josh Rosen. I mean, I've never heard of that. The value is unprecedented for what Miami's getting out of it. And I mean, the only negativity I can see out of that are people that are so lost in thinking that Tua is the answer to all the problems, or Herbert, or it's a rookie quarterback next year. But you can't beat the deal Miami's getting, because Rosen's only 6 months older than Kyler Murray, and he's played all through college. I think Josh Rosen started as a freshman at UCLA, and now he's had a year under his belt in the league. So you're getting a 22-year-old quarterback who's very smart, has a lot more experience. I mean, it's not even comparable, Dwayne Haskins or Kyler Murray, to Josh Rosen right now. You're talking about two quarterbacks that have played 1 year total in college. Rosen's much further along, and he's much more affordable. So I can't go anything at all that I can say negative about that trade. If Josh Rosen ends up being a good quarterback, doesn't even have to be, Dan Marino, Tom Brady type. If he's just a very good quarterback, that's probably the best trade in the history of the franchise. That's my opinion.
That's high praise to say the best trade ever. Okay, and you, Ian?
Yeah.
So, first of all, the prediction that I made for the draft actually ended up coming to fruition, because I did suggest that the Dolphins were going to build in the trenches. I said either offensive line or defensive line, and obviously they went with Christian Wilkins, which I was very, very happy about. Being at the Miami Dolphins draft party at Hard Rock Stadium, the fans were all chanting for Dwayne Haskins there at number 13 since he was available, and I was just saying to myself, I hope we don't pick him, because I didn't feel like he was a number 13 quality quarterback. And sure enough, they passed on him and picked up Wilkins. And then Josh Rosen. A couple of things that is just important to mention. Number one, words like brilliant, unbelievable, him being a steal in the draft, those are all the things that are being said around the national media since the draft happened. And if you think about it, and you think long and hard about the drafts that the Miami Dolphins have participated in over the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years, when's the last time anyone has talked about a Miami Dolphins draft that way? It's just, it could be one of two things. It could be the smartest, move the Dolphins have made in franchise history, besides obviously drafting Dan Marino, because I think that will always be the best, right? Or it could be a great value move that didn't end up producing what the Dolphins organization thought it was going to produce. But either way, we're in an extremely better position today than we were a month ago with the addition of this young quarterback that has so much significant potential. When you think about what the Dolphins gave up, similar to what Chad said, ultimately, yeah, we gave up the second this year, but we picked it up in next season NFL draft, and we gave up a 5th-round pick. So ultimately, we gave up a 5th-round pick because of the trade. We didn't end up giving up a second because we gained it. We gave up a 5th-round pick for a top 10 quarterback from last season. And I have to remind people about it because some people are still a little hesitant with understanding, what the bottom line is for the Miami Dolphins. But in addition to that, and I know it's been talked about a lot, the salary that Josh Rosen is getting from the Miami Dolphins, he's actually going to be getting paid less for 3 years of service with the Dolphins than what the Dolphins are paying 36-year-old Ryan Fitzpatrick for 2 years. And again, I think that goes to the brilliance of the leadership of the Dolphins for them not to cave to do anything that's exceptional or crazy, for them not to spend significant amounts of money, for them not to, pull the trigger when they knew they had the opportunity to wait to be able to get what they wanted. But when anyone asks me my opinion about this trade, I say it's a low risk, high reward. Bottom line is, this time next year, we could be talking about a potential franchise quarterback with Rosen, or we could be talking about the Dolphins, drafting another quarterback in the 2020 NFL draft. Either way, we're not losing a lot. And this kid seems poised. He seems very smart based on everything we've seen. He seems extremely personable. He's already used social media more times, I think, in the month that he's been with the Dolphins than Ryan Tannehill ever did when he was with the Dolphins. But that's not necessarily a knock. Some people like it, some people don't. But then also, he has that experience, as Chad talked about. 1 year in the NFL. There is no way you can rate a rookie quarterback through their rookie season that's going to tell you how they're going to do the rest of their career. I saw an article, and I'm going to give a shameless plug, an article today at the PhinManiacs website that talked about Peyton Manning's first year and how he had gone 3-13 his first season. And then he came back and had a Hall of Fame career. Now, I'm not saying that Josh Rosen is going to have a Hall of Fame career, but I'm saying Josh Rosen had a tough first season. Your first season is not going to dictate how you play the rest of your career. And I think the Dolphins have set themselves up to really be exciting this coming season. Prior to this Josh Rosen trade, I think everybody was just like, okay, it's, we're going to lose a lot of games. We're going to end up drafting a quarterback next year. But then after the Josh Rosen trade, I've talked to so many people that have said they're more interested now in the Dolphins than they were before. So many more people that said they're going to be attending games because they want to see what this kid has. And just a lot more excitement. I've seen a bunch of people already order jerseys. The guy hasn't even thrown a football for the Dolphins yet. So these are some interesting times, fellas, for the Dolphins, because a lot of good can happen, and we could be part of that good because we're sitting here watching it as it goes on. So I'm excited, as you guys can tell. I think there's a lot of upside for us, and I'm really looking forward to the season.
All right.
And
okay, go ahead.
Let me
Sorry,
chime
Chad.
something in there real quick, Lewis, too. I mean, he touched on the rookie season, and I'm not one that likes to sit here and say, I'm going to make excuses, but just to put things into perspective, you're talking about a rookie quarterback, and as Ian said, rookie quarterbacks rarely do good. Josh Rosen's statistics weren't really any different from Darnold or Josh Allen, other rookie quarterbacks. Rookie quarterbacks tend to have a rough first year. But putting that in perspective, the entire line got hurt for Josh Rosen. I mean, literally, he had like the 7th round pick starting at tackle. They had some guy off a practice squad starting at guard. Every player on their offensive line was hurt. And I mean, I think you guys have probably seen floating around that he was the highest sacked quarterback in under 2.5 seconds. He probably had the worst offensive line in the NFL in front of him due to injuries. And they swapped out his offensive coordinator like less than halfway through the season. And so I would say to expect any rookie quarterback to play behind the worst line in football and have to learn a different offense halfway through the season, what would you expect to have happen, with a rookie quarterback? So I have a hard time putting very much weight on what his stats were with the Cardinals, because it was a really bad football team and a really tough situation he's being put into. And when you put that all into perspective, his stats weren't any worse than the other rookie quarterbacks. So to me, it's fairly encouraging when you really think about it that way.
No, I get you, man. I do. I understand the whole thing about the rookie season and everything. Okay, so now this is a question I have for both of you, because Ian brought up something else that actually triggered a thought in my brain hole. What exactly is it that Josh Rosen has to display for you to consider the Dolphins not drafting in 2020? Because, I've heard both sides of an argument, but absolutely nothing regarding in between. It's either Rosen immediately shows elite level talent and he is the guy, or he is not the guy and the Dolphins need to draft in 2020 a quarterback, no questions asked. It's what needs to happen for that? What are the minimum standard requirements for Rosen to be able to stave off the Dolphins drafting Tua or Herbert or whoever?
That's a tough question, Lewis. There's so many variables involved in there, but for me, I don't really worry about it, I guess, because I think the position, and that's why I'm raving about the trade so much, it is so difficult to get a franchise quarterback in the NFL. And I think the Cardinals horribly managed the situation. And I know Josh Rosen wasn't happy, but if I'm the Cardinals and I'm really, really interested in Kyler Murray, I'm telling Josh Rosen that from the front. It says, look, we like this kid. We want to see what he can do. We want to bring him in and have you guys both on our team. Miami may be in that situation next year. If Josh Rosen plays okay, but you're not convinced that he's going to be your long-term solution at quarterback, you got to go and get Tua and make that work with Rosen. That's where you're at. And so I guess I don't predicate anything he does based on the value, because a guy like Tua is so valuable to have a franchise quarterback, and they're so tradable that I'm hoping the team's bold enough that if we somehow get one of those top quarterbacks, and we have them rated really high, we really like how they look in college this coming season, I'd go ahead and draft him anyway. And I don't worry whether Rosen looks really good or really bad. I just realize how hard it is and how valuable it is to grab potential franchise quarterbacks when I'm in position to get them. And so I'm just putting that out there, that even if he plays solid, that wouldn't stop me from drafting somebody like Tua, having both of them in the building for a year or two, and then maybe trading somebody at a different point in the season when you figure out who you really want. Kind of that same Jimmy Johnson drafting Troy Aikman, like in the first round pick, and then he comes around and drafts Steve Walsh, right after him, because he realized, I need to get a franchise quarterback. I don't know which one of these guys is going to be the franchise quarterback. I'm going to get both of them. But with that being said, from Rosen, kind of what I'm expecting is, I believe he's extremely good pre-snap. I think Josh Rosen is already up in the tops of the league, top 10, 15 quarterbacks in the league, with how intelligent he is and how capable he's going to be to manage the play calls, the formation, the audibles, the looks before the snap. What I don't know is how well he's going to do after the snap at handling the speed of the game, picking up the coverages, getting the ball out on time, those sorts of things. That's something he had some difficulties in with the Cardinals, and you just don't know if it was the personnel was that bad or Josh Rosen was really struggling with the speed of the game. So I guess if I'm seeing him really struggle throwing a lot of bad passes, especially if he has decent protection, stuff like that, if he just does not appear to be adapting to the speed of the game, that's probably going to make me a little more antsy to get another quarterback next year. I don't really base it on wins or losses. I like that because I don't think this team is really, really focused on trying to make the playoffs this year. I think they're going to try to win, but I don't think their goal right now is to compete for the playoffs. Their goal is to build a complete team over the next couple of years. And so if Josh Rosen, throws 20 touchdowns and 10 interceptions, or even 30 touchdowns and 15 interceptions, something like that, and we go 6-10, I would consider that pretty solid, I guess, if we're looking at stats, Lewis.
And Ian?
Yeah, so we got to be careful that we don't fall into the Ryan Tannehill trap, right? That we accept mediocrity. But here's, and I do agree with you in certain respects, Chad, that number one, you can't really look at wins and losses at this point, just because we are in a team rebuild. So that means that, some of the talent levels are going to be very different in some of the positions. But I think if you're the GM, if I were the general manager of the Miami Dolphins, which I'll be available at the end of the season, I would, just kidding. I would never want that job because those guys know what they're doing and I don't. But I would say there's probably 4 categories that you've kind of got to grade Josh Rosen on throughout the season, not just in rookie or in mini camps or in preseason, but also during the regular season. You got to look at, accuracy, strength, intelligence, and the intangibles. Intangibles meaning leadership, teamwork, and making other players better around you. And I think what you've got to do is you've got to say, okay, you look at each one independently and got to provide a grade based on what you've seen, how you've coached him, if he's taken that coaching and applied it to what he does on a day-to-day basis, and then is he accurate with his throws? Is he going through his progressions and picking the best place to throw the ball to? So I think when you look at all of that, you come out with an average, and then at a certain point, you determine, okay, if it's an A- or B+, is that where you say this is our guy? Or is it he has to be at an A, averaging through all of these different categories, and then is it our guy? And if it's not, then you do have to bring on that next person. And again, the one thing that we're doing this season that we haven't done in a very long time is we are having a competition at quarterback. Honestly, I think it's Josh Rosen's position to lose, but I believe the coach when he says there's going to be a competition for every single position. He's a brand new coach. He wants to see effort from every one of the players, and I will guarantee you he's going to put those guys on the field that show the best effort, regardless of what your position is, regardless of how long you've been in the league, regardless of how many Pro Bowls you've been in. Our team right now is a bunch of young guys that are trying to prove themselves, and I think the same goes for the quarterback position. But, obviously, in order to be able to truly assess Josh Rosen, you're going to have to throw him in as a starting quarterback at some point so that you can really see what you got with the guy. But I think that's how you do it. I don't think it could be based on wins and losses. If we go to the playoffs and the guy, coach of the year, for Coach Flores, also Rosen would be our guy, I think, going forward too, if we were able to figure out a way to make it to the playoffs, and he's a big reason for it.
I go along with that, Ian. They'll have competition, but I think quickly, just for that position, obviously all other positions, they will have competitions, but I think at quarterback, you just don't, Ryan Fitzpatrick is what he is. He's not going to, suddenly turn into this all-pro quarterback.
Well,
he never has been.
He did long enough to get Fitzmagic attached to his name, so we'll say that.
Right. Yeah, but he's played a lot of snaps, Lewis, and he's never been anything but just an up and down quarterback. And I don't see him suddenly.
Right. I didn't mean to imply that he was that great, but
I just need to say that Ryan Fitzpatrick, and you guys can agree with me or disagree with me. Ryan Fitzpatrick is a bigger Matt Moore with a beard. He's
Fitzpatrick is better than Matt Moore.
Keep throwing it down the field.
Straight up, Fitzpatrick is better than Matt Moore.
I just don't think it matters.
He's a slinger.
I think Ryan Fitzpatrick's the perfect fit because he's at the end of his career. He knows that. He's been a journeyman bridge quarterback for like the last 5 years of his career. But I think there'll be no animosity. He knows the organization's going to want Rosen in those games because if you're not going to be trying to make a hard playoff push this year, which I just don't think that's their primary focus. It does nothing but help the Dolphins in the bigger picture to get Rosen under center, unless Rosen's really struggling, like he can't pick up the offense or he's making a lot of really bad decisions, which I just don't see that from him. He's pretty smart as a quarterback, very, very, very smart. So I think they'll want to get him in as soon as they possibly can, because one is they need to evaluate 2020, and two, it does nothing but help him move along and start to develop over the course of the year. Now, I know other positions you've got to have that competition, but you can't go very many games with Ryan Fitzpatrick starting without it starting to make no sense, because like I said, they're not going right now with a plan that Ryan Fitzpatrick is going to be quarterback in this team in 2020 or 2021. He's here simply to help get a young quarterback up to speed. And Josh Rosen, at least this season, gets to be that guy that they try to get up to speed. So I don't know. I'm just along the line. If Josh Rosen it'd be different if this were Dwayne Haskins or Kyler Murray, because those guys are so limited in experience, have only played 1 year. But Josh Rosen, he's got, a lot of college games under his belt from UCLA, and he's got a full year in the pros under the with the Cardinals. So I don't see it being very beneficial now to put him on the bench behind a Ryan Fitzpatrick right now for the Dolphins.
And I highly doubt that they're going to put him on the bench. There's no way that I can see Rosen doing anything but starting next year, just because regardless of who turns out to be better in camp, the idea of putting Fitzpatrick in the starting lineup, even to begin the year, it just feels like a waste of time now that Rosen is here. And I don't think the Dolphins right now are in the business of wasting their time. They're either running for 2020 or they're pushing for a playoff. Either way that you approach it, Rosen is the better guy, just based on pedigree alone. Just that alone. Now, I heard a breath taken. Does that mean that somebody has?
Yeah, that was me. Well, that was me because I'm being devil's advocate here, because what kind of message is that to the team if you're saying you're going to give everybody the opportunity to compete, and then Josh Rosen has a horrible preseason and Ryan Fitzpatrick has a great preseason, and then you start Josh Rosen, right? Then we're back to it doesn't matter who you're bringing in with Tannehill. Tannehill's a starting guy regardless of if he's good or bad. But I think that's kind of here nor there at this point, and I'll let you guys move on. I was just thinking that because I don't think the coach wants to set that standard. But I mean, the goal is to get Rosen starting from day one, and I agree with that, and I want to see him starting from day one. But he has to show he's ready for it, and he's got to show it with the team that we're going to be putting on the field. So we'll move forward.
That's a fair point. It is. So you guys have both made your cases. Now, I'm going to give you what my super genius plan would have been if things go the way that I would actually hope that they would. So, here's my evil plan. I wrote about it at Dolphins Wire about a week ago. Not quite yet, but pretty soon to be a week ago. And I thought it was a good idea. Some people agreed with me. Some people thought I was out of my mind. But, well, most evil plans usually are on the side of, I don't know, eccentric. I guess I'll use that word. But all the same, here's what I would do if I was Chris Grier going forward. Now, I based this on the idea that if we're going to look at Josh Rosen, if we're going to legitimately evaluate this kid and decide, is he worth it or is he not worth it, then I have to look at it from the perspective of what happens if his performance is about on par with what he ultimately did with the Cardinals. Like, let's take this for example. Josh Rosen, all those things about him are true. He was a former top 10 pick. He's very smart, blah, 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 blah. We've already gone through all the positives in his game. So, now here's the situation. All those positives still amounted ultimately to the worst record in the NFL last year. Rosen started most of the season. I know that Sam Bradford had something to do with it, but most of the time it was Rosen. Rosen had more interceptions than touchdowns, if I'm not mistaken, and it wasn't a pretty picture at all. And yes, all of those things were true. He had bad coaching. He lost his offensive coordinator about halfway through, and you could argue whether Byron Leftwich was better or worse than the guy before him, but nevertheless, the result is the same. Rosen did not do well in that 1 year with the Cardinals. So, here's the situation. If the Miami Dolphins are going to evaluate Josh Rosen, what are we basing this off of? That's why I asked you guys. Because if Rosen does better, but still not great, and the Dolphins still lose a bunch of games, well, if the talent level on paper is really going to be as low as everybody thinks it is, and it's still going to be this situation where you just don't know if it's going to work or not, you don't know if the talent level is going to be on par with what you need to win games, then why does Rosen not get another pass? Why is it now here in Miami with a new team, a new set of coaches, a new everything, but still the same level of talent? Why does now Rosen's evaluation count and the 1 year with the Cardinals does not? That's what I'm basing this whole idea off of. If Rosen the player does well but the team does not, most people are going to look at that as they need to draft another quarterback. Would you agree with that? Real quick.
I think a fan that doesn't follow the game as closely will probably say that, like, oh, they're losers, they're losing with him. I think anybody that's doing what we're doing right now, they're going to look at how is Rosen performing. I mean, if you're going in and Rosen has a game where he throws 4 touchdowns and no interceptions, and we lose 35-28, are you ready to go get a different quarterback? I mean, that sort of scenario, Okay, I think Lewis, what I'm looking for personally is him to throw 2-to-1 on the touchdown interception ratio. That's what I'm looking for. I think that my personal opinion, despite what maybe the general opinion is in the media or the perception there, is I think the current Dolphins team is actually quite a bit better than what team he played on last year. So I do expect Josh Rosen to play better with the Dolphins than he did with the Cardinals last year because, like I said, the whole offensive line was hurt last year. He's coming in, at least starting right now, with a Pro Bowl caliber left tackle. He's got a veteran center. Jesse Davis is no longer a rookie. He's a veteran lineman. They've drafted a couple linemen. I don't think the Dolphins' offensive line is one of the worst lines in the league. I think they're probably somewhere in the middle of the pack.
And when somebody gets hurt, because they will.
Well, we'll have to see how everything plays out. But he also Miami has a full group of veteran wide receivers. So Josh Rosen's getting put in with at least an average line. He's getting put with at least an average to above average core of wide receivers, and he's got some talented backs behind him. So I think coming into his second year now and the type of quarterback he is, I do expect him to be able to throw a 2-to-1 TD to interception ratio on this team, as it is right now anyway.
And if they lose a bunch of games, that's irrelevant.
I don't really care about him winning or losing a bunch of games for evaluating Josh Rosen, unless he's doing things that directly cost the game. If we're in a tight game or we're up 7 points and we're down to 2 minutes and he throws a really bad pass into coverage that you didn't need to throw, some really bad decision making. If we're talking about those kind of losses, yeah, I might weigh him a little more. But if our defense is giving up a lot of points, or like if our defense looks like it did last year, I'm gonna have a hard time saying like, oh, Rosen obviously isn't the guy, because if our defense is just giving up points in piles, that's not his fault. So I think you have to weigh that in. But I definitely, if he doesn't progress forward, if we go through this year and Josh Rosen again throws more interceptions than he does touchdowns, I'm concerned. I'm definitely going to be concerned, because those more times than not, unless you have a bunch of freak, wide receivers that the ball hits them in the hands and they don't catch it and it pops up and gets picked off, or they're Hail Marys at the end of the half of the game, and you're getting some of those padded interceptions. But I expect a quarterback in his second year to throw more touchdowns than he does interceptions.
All right, fair enough. So ultimately, wins and losses are not what you're looking at. You're looking at his individual performance. Okay, that's fine. So now here's what I'm thinking about. If Rosen does well, but the team still loses, that means that they're still going to be in a very good position, perhaps even number 1 overall again, and they'll be in a position to grab Tua or Herbert or whoever you think is the best quarterback in the 2020 class. So now, this is what everybody has been saying all this time, is like, regardless of what happens with Rosen, if the Dolphins end up losing, they need to draft Tua. Like, I'm going to say Tua because that's easier than saying whoever, because everybody wants Tua. Tua's exciting. Tua's the next great quarterback of all time. He's going to go down in history as the best quarterback to ever play the game, blah, 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 all these things that they're saying about him. And the Dolphins would be stupid to pass him up. Or would they? My entire...
So
Go ahead.
I'm
no,
sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. No.
I was going to say, didn't everybody say that Ryan Leaf was going to be the best quarterback of all time? And didn't we go through the whole what was it? Lose for luck at one time. He's a good quarterback,
luck, yes.
But he's not the best quarterback around. Suck for luck. So there's no guarantees. There's no guarantees that any of these guys that were just drafted this past season are gonna do very well. So it is a team game, and if you feel like you've got the right person in the right position, you can get some competition, but I don't think you need to go number one for a Tua if you feel that Rosen is the right guy. And fortunately, I started off by talking about Leaf and Luck, because fortunately, it's not up to us as the fans. It's up to the leadership, of the Dolphins to assess and make that decision. And I'll tell you, if I am also in agreement that it is not, the success, as I mentioned already, the success of Rosen is not based on wins and losses. And for your casual fan, they are going to say anything less than a playoff spot is going to be a disappointment. Because if we're not in a playoff spot, that means that we went 9 or 7 or worse. And for that casual fan, they're going to say, well, obviously we got this new quarterback and he didn't help us get to where we needed to go, but if you're a real, not a real fan, because everybody's a real fan, but if you're a fan that pays more attention,
not everybody,
or
not
you're
everybody,
one of
Ian.
us, or
not everybody.
Yeah.
You remember the guy?
Or one of those fans that's on Twitter.
Or the guy who was on TV. What was it? The one guy who's a Panthers fan?
Yeah, he
now?
was on the draft. Yeah, I'm sure he's enjoying his Panthers right now. But anyway, if you're one of those guys, then you're going to know it's not going to be based on wins or losses. And actually, we might end up being in a good position if Rosen turns out being good. Then we could build a team around the guy. Do you still get competition for him? Yes, but you do not need to pick a number one pick, or you don't need to get a top 5 quarterback in the draft. Would you pick somebody in the 3rd or 4th round? Sure, why not? But I think that's all going to depend on what he shows this coming season. So anyway, sorry to interrupt. I know you're about to say something.
Yeah, it's fine. I wanted your guys' input because as I go through my plan, I wanted to be able to hear from you. Like, let's see if I can show you my thinking and see if I can get it to get you to think about it as well. So here we go. So now we talked about all this. We're evaluating Rosen. My plan is to get the Dolphins to have their cake and eat it too. If the Dolphins lose a bunch of games, but Rosen shows something, now, well, you said it, that it's good to have competition and everything. They don't need to draft the number 1 overall, but they should still grab somebody, which is fine. That's fine. But if I'm the Dolphins and I am Chris Greer, I am seriously considering trade back. How many teams besides Miami, gentlemen, and real quick, just quick answers, how many teams besides Miami do you foresee needing a quarterback in 2020? Just predictions off your heads.
I'm going to say 5 for sure.
8 to 10. Okay, 8 to 10 though? Wait, who? But that's what I meant, is who, real quick.
I'm saying there's going to be 5 teams vying for quarterbacks next year.
So
they're looking for a starting. To be clear, they're looking for a starting quarterback. I think Ian's probably right. They'd be 8 to 10 that might take Tua if they're up there. But
who would go up to get him?
Who would go get him? It's going to depend on the season, obviously. Let's say Tom Brady or Drew Brees tear their ACLs. Those guys are probably going to retire. I don't think they're going to try to rehab and come back into their mid-40s. They might, but even if they do, those teams might suddenly be enticed because they'll need a quarterback now. I think you'll have a few failed quarterbacks that are kind of reaching the ends of their contracts that teams are maybe like a David Carr for the Raiders. They're going to just decide, look, This guy's been here for 5 or 6, kind of like where Tannehill ended up this year. So I'm just predicting 5, maybe 6 teams are going to be vying for a quarterback.
All right.
Go ahead, Lewis.
So if you're correct, and like say the Raiders have to part ways with Derek Carr, and I would even go as far as to say the Bengals, because the Bengals, I can't imagine they're going to stick with Andy Dalton that much longer.
Didn't the Bengals
don't forget the Broncos?
They got Drew Lock, so they're going to stick with him for a little while. Like, they'll probably give him a shot before they...
Yeah, it all depends on scenarios and where teams are at. But
and they also have Flacco, so they're not going to... I don't think they're going to go quarterback again, because they have Flacco and now they have Lock, too, so I don't think that's going to happen. But maybe the Chargers, because...
Philip Rivers hasn't got a contract in place right now. So.
Yeah, so Philip Rivers going is...
Don't forget the... I'm going to say this just because... It could go one of 2 different ways, but you look at the Bills and you look at the Jets. Their quarterbacks did not have a good season last year. If they have a horrible season during their sophomore year, which is supposed to be the year that they get better, that may be an opportunity for them to get another quarterback.
You think Gase might want to go get his guy? Because he didn't
Possibly,
pick Darnold.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I mean, it depends on the scenarios, again, where you're at. Like, if the Jets say are terrible this year and they're like, let's say the Dolphins do end up being really high. I really don't think that's going to be the case. To be honest,
neither do I, but just in case.
Let's say we're the number 1 overall pick, and Tua decides to declare, and Tua lights up college football, because those things both have to occur for him to be available. But let's say that happens, and so the hype for Tua is double than what it was even for Murray. He's like Andrew Luck sort of hype. Then a team like the Jets may be willing to jump up from the 4 spot because it doesn't cost them as much. They might be trying to trade a 1 and a 2 or something like that in the following year to move up 3 spots. They might, but I don't see the Jets with Darnold, assuming Darnold doesn't get hurt or something and Gase doesn't get fired, which is a real possibility. Assuming that doesn't happen, if the Jets are like, say, 8 or 9, I don't think they are going to be able to put the draft capital in 2 years removed from getting Darnold to move all the way up to grab somebody like Tua for what the cost would be.
Right. Okay, so...
It has to be somebody who desperately wants to move up to start him immediately.
Right, and even then, even if it's not Tua, because remember, there's like 3 or 4 quarterbacks who might be coming out this upcoming year that people are like, he'd be worth a first-round pick. So
yeah, maybe, Lewis.
Yeah,
I don't really get hyped up on a year ahead.
Yeah, everything is hypothetical right now, but this is a hypothetical plan. So if there's a team,
go ahead.
If there's a team that wants to get Tua that badly, then I would trade back, because if the Dolphins are in a position to draft him, then that means that there are going to be teams who would be willing to listen to offers to say, "Hey, you want him? What do you got for us?"
So you're throwing that scenario that Rosen plays at least decent then, right?
I am coming from the standpoint that if we're going to base his evaluation off of what he does next year, and considering the fact that the talent level is projected to be about on par, maybe a little better than what he had in Arizona, then I think he deserves 2 years at least, even if it's just 2 years. And I'll explain why in a minute. But this all plays into it. It all wraps up on a nice little bow at the end. Rosen should get at least 2 years to be evaluated, which means that the Dolphins would pass on a quarterback in the first round in 2020. The whole premise on that is that some team is going to be willing to trade up to get their hands on Tua or Herbert or whoever their guy is. And in order to get something like that, the Dolphins would be having to get some major payment as compensation. So much so, in fact, that they would probably get an extra first rounder the next draft, 2021.
Oh, I'm way more than that. I'd say way more. Again, if Tua, if the hype is as big as it's feeling, if Tua is really, really hyped, I think you get 2 number 1s, Lewis, honestly.
Okay, so you get 2 number 1s, which would be even better. That makes my plan even better. So let's go with that, sure. So
Okay.
you get major draft capital for maybe 2020 and even 2021. I want that first rounder in 2021. That's very important. So you get
absolutely.
You get an extra first rounder in 2021 to let the team get Tua or whoever they want. The Dolphins get a first round pick. Again, that 2020 year is just not going to be one of those quarterbacks, which since everybody's going to be running for them, that means there's still going to be some very nice talent available in 2020 for the first round. And also the Dolphins have a truckload of draft picks ready to go in 2020. So they have 2 second rounders, they have 2 thirds, 2 fourths, 1 fifth rounder. They got rid of the other one, and they have, I think, 2 sixths and 2 sevenths. So they have 2 of everything except the 5th rounder and a first rounder. So that is already major draft capital that they can use to get a team built around Josh Rosen or whoever else is going to be coming the next year after that. This is where the 2 first round picks comes into play. If after 2 years Josh Rosen does not convince everybody he's the guy, you use that second first rounder that you acquired last year to go up and get your hands on Trevor Lawrence. That is the premise of my plan. You pass up 1 year, and if Rosen doesn't show he's the guy, you have the next draft ready and waiting for you to go up there and get your guy. Because no team, I can't imagine many teams are going to be willing to pass up an extra first rounder.
I see what you did there, Lewis.
I like the scenario. I don't like the name. I don't like putting players in it, but the strategy is sound. But and then when you talk Trevor Lawrence, you're talking about a guy who's played 1 year and he's like 19 years old or something, and so he's got 2 more years of college. And I'll go out on a limb right now, Lewis. I'll tell you, I don't expect Trevor Lawrence to be the first quarterback taken in 2021. Not because he didn't have freshman year, just because 2 years is a long time. He was playing on a stacked team at Clemson, and in 2 years so much changes. The landscape on who's hot and who's not, and who's the next big quarterback. I've seen that a lot, and so to me, I think it's even crazy to be doing that for Tua right now too. It won't shock me at all if Tua is like the 3rd best quarterback in 2020. It may even decide not to declare because of it, but you have to let those times play out. But with what you're saying, absolutely, that's the power of that trade you're touching on, Lewis. Is if Rosen does well because they gave up peanuts for him. If we're in position, and it doesn't matter really if it's Tua or Herbert, you just have to be in that position, and you need a team that really wants that quarterback desperately. You've literally just created this situation to actually build a very good football team, just loaded with talent because of the position you're in. You're going into a draft with 15 picks or whatever they're estimated to get after the compensation picks. And
it's going to be 12. It's going to be 12 picks total after compensation picks are thrown.
Okay, so 12 picks, but they have like what, a first, 2 seconds, 2 thirds, 2 fourths, and a fifth, and 2 sixths or something like that.
Yeah, they're missing the 5th rounder from when they traded it during the trade down, and they don't have an extra first, but everything else they have 2 of after the compensation picks.
So you're starting with a pile of picks. If Rosen is feeling like he's the guy, you're in a beautiful position. You're absolutely right, and I absolutely make that trade.
But that's why it's so important that I give Rosen 2 years, because if 2019 doesn't go well for the team, but Rosen shows something, even if it's not, he's the next Dan Marino level of good, even if it's just like, okay, maybe he plays on Tannehill-esque level, which, by the way, again, Tannehill's not a bad quarterback. I don't care how many of you are happy that he's gone. He's not a bad quarterback. And if Rosen does good enough that you could say, okay, he kind of looks like Tannehill, but he's still developing, then that's good enough. Even if the team doesn't do well as a whole, if Rosen shows something, you have to be willing to give him that second year. And that's why the plan is built the way it is. If after 2 years Rosen doesn't convince you he's the guy, then you have that extra first rounder to go get your guy in 2021. And I'm sure that they're going to be hyping up a lot more QBs than just Lawrence. There's going to be more guys there.
No, I agree. Honestly, Lewis, I think, this is just my opinion right now, I'm basing all this based on our coaching and based on what the Patriots do, but the Dolphins don't just want a talented quarterback. They want a quarterback that's very, very smart. And I'm not saying that Dwayne Haskins isn't that smart or Drew Lock isn't that smart, but I don't think they are as cerebral as Josh Rosen. And Miami, you can already see what they're doing with the personnel they're bringing in. They are going to do exactly what the Patriots do. They're going to come out and they're going to run an offense that'll have 4 wide receivers spread out. And you're going to see them the next series come in a power I with a fullback and Josh Rosen under center. And then you're going to see them come out the next series with double tight ends. And that is very difficult to do for quarterbacks because you're changing personnel groupings. You have receivers that you may not get to be as comfortable with because you're switching to tight ends, then you're switching to a fullback. And it takes a quarterback that's extremely capable at understanding playbooks, reading defenses, and I think that's exactly why they want Rosen. I think that's what Rosen's strengths are. That's why Tom Brady was so good. That's why Peyton Manning was so good. Tom Brady doesn't have this rocket arm compared to like a Jay Cutler. He understands how to run so many different play formations based on what defenses are doing, that I don't know that somebody like Tua would even qualify for what Miami is going to ask of their quarterbacks from a mental standpoint, for what you have to be able to process mentally from a playbook that you're getting thrown at you. So I think that's why Josh Rosen's in Miami right now and Dwayne Haskins isn't, because Greer, I don't think he was even lying. He was straight up that, look, these guys that we're looking at are these top quarterbacks. They've only got a year of experience under their belt in Kyler Murray and Dwayne Haskins. And so I think you're absolutely right, Louis. I don't think they're going to come in. That's not what the Dolphins are doing. I think the media ran with it because somebody asked Josh Rosen that question, that do you think this is a tryout? And Josh Rosen's response was, well, yeah, I think every day you're at a tryout. You got to look at, somebody's trying to get your job every single day of the rest of your career. That was the point he was making. But I'm with you, Louis. I think they are intending to develop Josh Rosen over the next few years. I don't think the Dolphins staff is planning on just judging how he does in one season, whether or not they need to go get another quarterback that he's not adequate. And so I know that's maybe kind of a statement that a lot of people wouldn't agree on, but I think that Josh Rosen's already a guy they want over the quarterbacks next year based on his mental capabilities.
So based on my 2021 mock draft that I've already put out to multiple places, I have the first 7 rounds already selected. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I'm
guys,
sure
I don't.
Out there
I don't sleep. I actually just found one online, and they did say that Trevor Lawrence was going to be the number 1 pick. It's so hard to say, but I'm okay with your plan. To be honest with you, Louis, I am a believer that you can trade back and get some additional picks, depending on how important your pick is to other teams, which is exactly what happened with the Dolphins this past draft. And it worked out beautifully. And it's really a work of art when your general manager can find value, that another team really, really covets the pick that you have, and you're able to negotiate a good deal, where both parties feels like they made out. And I think if the Dolphins do end up getting a top pick next season, which I'm like Chad, I don't think that's going to happen, but if they do, I'm okay with trading that pick away to pick up some more capital, because if we've got the 12 picks in 2020, and then you get another bunch of picks for 2021, or you pick up a couple picks in 2020, you're getting a lot of young talent that you can build. And I think it's an extra first,
an extra first, Ian. That's very important. Anything less than an extra first, and anything less than an extra first rounder, and my plan is a flop for real.
Oh, agreed. But it's going to be an extra first rounder plus, because it's not just going to be an extra first rounder. It's going to be, probably an extra 6th rounder, 5th rounder, whatever that is. But if the Dolphins organization, if the front office is able to do something like that, then again, it just continues to show that these guys are smart, and they know what they're doing, and they're building the franchise from the ground up, from young guys going forward. And it's exactly what everybody's talked about this season, except Armando Salgado. who said that, that we're tanking this year, which we're not. But anyway, we're not going to say that. We've got, we're building a foundation. We're building it with young guys. We're building it through the draft, which I think is what every NFL team wants to do.
Right. So glad you guys are on board with my idea. I don't know if it'll. I highly doubt it'll play out that way. But oh my goodness, if it did, I could just imagine like Rosen ends up being the guy, and they actually have 2 first-rounders for 2021, just elite level talent after a loaded draft like 2020. Just I could see them pushing for a Super Bowl if that was the case, for real. Honest to God. Like, it's all speculative until it happens, but like if you could imagine 12 picks in the 2020 draft, all Greer picked talent, which so far has been pretty solid, and then 2 first-rounders in 2021, and Rosen is your quarterback. He's proven he's the franchise guy. Could you imagine, for real?
No, I think this team is taking a direction of being competitive, Lewis. And I don't get caught up in, oh my God, we're going to go win a Super Bowl. Everybody wants to win the Super Bowl, but what Miami's really wanting to get back to, and what they're making decisions for right now, is to try to be a perennial contending team, a team that's always pushing to make the playoffs, a team that's always in the thick of it. And we just haven't had that. And a lot of teams don't have it because what Ian is saying is right. Every team says the same thing. We want to build through the draft. Everybody wants to build through the draft. But the reality is the NFL, the leashes are so short on the GMs and the coaches. I would probably say 3/4 of the league right now is under tremendous pressure to have to make the playoffs right now. Tremendous pressure. You look at the Cardinals right now, and you look at the Dolphins situation, and I look at Josh Rosen, I'm like, man, Rosen's getting to come in. He's going to get put with some really good quarterback coaches, Caldwell and O'Shea, and they're already bringing in a fullback, and they've brought in extra tight ends. So I don't think they're going to expose Josh Rosen to a lot of taking a lot of hits. I think they'll tighten up and keep him protected and help him along. And even the fan base, nobody's expecting the Dolphins to come in and take the Patriots out this year and win the division. They're just looking for a young team to get better. But you look at, organization like the Cardinals, Kyler Murray's expected to win right now. Like they're under all kinds of pressure that he'll start. Their GM even announced on opening day he's starting. And so you get these teams, and we've been doing this cycle for 2 decades, I've said, and you realize that, oh my God, we got to try to make the playoffs this year. We got to try to win the Super Bowl. So you start spending money on high-priced free agent, because every team has holes. They need a couple offensive linemen, they need a D tackle, they need a corner. So you pay a massive salary to a guy who's really just average or maybe a little bit above average, because it's the best available guy that you can get to try to get your team better. And what you end up doing is you end up with several highly paid players that are just average to above average on your team. And Miami is one of these few teams right now where we've got a brand new coach. Greer is just coming to GM. I think Ross has endorsed this plan that we are not going to go into that same cycle of jumping into free agency and grabbing the best 2 or 3 free agents we can get on the market to try to get our team a little bit better. We're going to try to make move after move after move to build the team to be good, and it's going to take a couple years, maybe even 3 years, by the time you go through the 2020 draft and you develop the 2020 players and get into 2021, maybe like your plans work, Lewis, you got another number 1 pick. That's when we suddenly have the talent in place. It's young, and you've made these series of good moves that has given you a solid competitive football team. And it's exciting to me, even though I'm not expecting this team to be really good. We're finally doing that. We're not finally chasing our tail and paying these guys like a Mike Wallace, buku dollars when he's just not that good. It's really going to be interesting that there isn't a lot of pressure on this team to make the moves that they're making, and the flexibility that gives you when you it's almost like wanting to be on a diet and you want to lose weight, but you just can't pass up the food that's in front of you.
You can't pass up that Krispy Kreme donut.
You can't pass it
You're
up.
speaking my language, Chad.
Well, about that, so many teams want to do that, but I look at the New York Jets right now. I look at the Miami Dolphins, and the Jets were not a great team last year, and Adam Gase has jumped over there, and they're doing the same thing the Dolphins were doing last year, and they're shelling out money to C.J. Mosley, they're shelling out money to Le'Veon Bell, and I look at that and I'm like, I just don't know if that is going to get the Jets good enough to really be that competitive into the playoffs. To me, they're probably going to be one of these 8-8, 9-7 teams with all those players, and all you've done is just given up all your salary cap space to be average. And you kind of start to realize as a fan, it's okay to be 6-10 instead of 8-8, or 6-10 versus 9-7. If you're doing it for the purpose of really putting together a solid team that is going to compete year in and year out.
Right. Okay, so we've spent about an hour talking about just Josh Rosen, and we've pretty much ignored the fact that there's like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 other players that happen to join this team, plus more. Let's go ahead and get into that while we still have some time. So, Christian Wilkins, yay or nay? Would you have picked someone else in that spot?
Yay.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, in hindsight, absolutely yay. At the time, I was upset because I'm thinking you've got Ryan Fitzpatrick. You've got to get a potential franchise quarterback candidate every year you can until you get one.
You would have been the Haskins pick. Yeah, me too.
Well, if you would have asked me today, I would much rather have Rosen and Wilkins than just Dwayne Haskins. So I'm really happy.
Yeah.
At the time, I was really upset because I'm like, I like Wilkins. He's a great looking athlete, but man, I wanted that franchise quarterback really bad. But I love the pick, and I've researched him a lot more since then, and he's really freakish from an athletic standpoint.
He did a lot of the dirty work.
Well, he's really quick, and for a guy his size, and I see he had a few touchdowns running the ball. He's able to do that. So, we might even get to see him used on some third and short, or third and goal. You don't
Chandler
think so.
Cox.
We'll see.
Chandler Cox.
Chandler
Cox. He's a fullback.
Chandler Cox will be in there with him. But so I like that. But more than anything, listen to him. He's extremely intelligent when you hear him talk. Really smart. And again, I keep starting.
And he's got charisma.
Well, he does, but I keep saying like this. It's Patriot stuff. We're seeing the Patriots influence, and the Patriots value guys that are smart over guys that aren't, even if they're not as gifted athletically. And now you're getting both. You're getting a really intelligent guy. I think he's a community team leader type guy. And talk about an area of need. We desperately need help on the defensive line. So definite yay.
I love the kid's passion. I mean, and I know that's part of the full package, but you've kind of lost some passion leaders when you gave up Cam Wake and those loud guys that are going to get you going on game day. And I just really felt, especially with the chest bump that he gave the commissioner once he got drafted, like this is a kid that you want on your team, that's going to help your team when they're down, saying it's all right, guys, pick it up. We got another play, let's go do it. And in addition to everything that Chad just said, I love the pick. I really did.
All right, so we already know what the second-round pick was, technically speaking. We've already talked about it for an hour, so let's go ahead and jump into the next one. Michael Dieter out of Wisconsin.
I think it was a good pick. I think it was at the right time. I was saying all along that if you're going to, the biggest challenge, and let's be honest, the biggest challenge that we're going to have this season is really truly seeing what Josh Rosen has. And in order to do that, you have to be able to protect him. What was the statistic? He was 2.5 seconds was the average amount of time that it took for him to get sacked. You got to give him a little bit more time than that. So I love the fact that they were addressing the offensive line now. It looks like you don't know if Michael's going to be a starter from day one, because on the right guard, you've got Jesse Davis. But on the left guard, you got Isaac Asiata, who's been, he's been with the team for a couple years already and never really got a starting opportunity. So, see if you can get Michael Dieter to start from day one. I think that would be a win for the Dolphins. But I like the pick. I think he's athletic. He's good for blocking the pass rush. So I thought it was another really good pick. I was very glad to see that they picked up the offensive lineman there.
And Wisconsin is known for being like a factory for good offensive linemen, so hopefully that'll continue with Dieter. So we didn't get a 4th round pick. So let's see. No, wait, didn't we get a 4th rounder? I could have sworn.
Is that where Van Ginkel
right.
get picked at? Was he?
He got picked in the 5th, number 151.
Okay.
Yeah. So Andrew Van Ginkel. Nobody knew who that was. Like I meant nobody. I was in the draft room with everybody when they made that pick, and every single member of the beat writers and the guys are like, "Who? Who's that?" And I don't think anybody. I think the only one really talking about Van Ginkel was Chris Kaufman. I think that might have been like after the fact, but it's like. So he's apparently he's decent at coverage. He's decent at pass rushing. He says he likes to rush. He said he likes to rush the passer. So he could potentially be another outside linebacker in the 3-4 scheme, which would work for me, I guess, because we still need guys like that. The only other one we really have that I know of is Charles Harris, and nobody's really high on him right now. So maybe being back in his old Missouri scheme will reignite something in Harris, but I'm not holding my breath on that. So maybe Van Ginkel can offer something. When you get to the 5th, 6th, 7th round picks, unless they're like running backs and stuff, then it's very hard to assume that they're gonna be able to offer much. You just kind of have to hope for the best on that. Speaking of which, round 6, Isaiah Prince, tackle out of Ohio State. He's career right tackle. He's very good at run blocking, which is actually a change of pace considering what the Dolphins have emphasized for the past few years. Like, you have to be elite at pass blocking, and now all of a sudden you bring up this run blocking star who's actually not that great at pass blocking. So what do you think about that pick?
I'm not huge on it. He's got a lot of ability. You know, he's big and he's got the quickness. You know, had some ups and downs for Ohio State, but I feel like at that point in the draft, you know, to get a guy that has the talent level to play the positions, pretty good value at that late in the draft. We'll just have to see how motivated he is and you know, how good a shape he keeps himself and how he picks things up. So, you know, he's probably going to be a guy that, you know, on the best side, you know, maybe he realizes his potential and could be a right tackle. On the downside, he might be a practice squad player and a backup tackle on the team. And this team just needed, if anything, we needed depth on the offensive line, and he gives you that.
I don't know.
I agree. I think when you're looking at a 6th round pick, it's going to be hard. You know, it's going to be hard to see where he fits in the team. You know, he's right now he's behind Zach Sterup.
Yeah,
right,
that's what I was about to say. Is that if he can't beat out Zach Sterup of all people, then we might have a bigger problem.
But this is where really the first couple of picks you kind of expect, right? The 1st round pick with Christian Wilkins and then Michael Dieter. You kind of expect those guys, just because they went so high, they're going to be contributors. They're going to be starters on your team. When you start looking at the 5th, 6th, 7th round picks, that's where you can see what the coaches are doing with the players. You can see, you know, are they developing these kids? Because they're honestly, they're kids, you know, coming out of college to be NFL players. They did their talent search. They found these guys. They circled them and said, we want them for some reason, one reason or another. Now it's up to the coaches to develop them and make them into, you know, into NFL players. And, you know, we talk about the secrets to success. When you're talking about your tackles, it's about making sure that they're doing what they are supposed to be doing. And if you've got the coaches that can, you know, show these guys and make sure that they're working out the right way and making sure that their feet are in the right position and their hands are in the right position. And as long as they're doing their job, you should be able to plug them in, you know, at the right time. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be starters, but you can plug them in. And that's going to really be a 6th round tackle. That's going to be up to coaches to get these guys, to get him to where he needs to be.
I hear you. All right, so last 2 draft picks, Myles Gaskin and Chandler Cox. Cox actually went before Gaskin. They went back-to-back, 233 and 234th overall, respectively. So, gentlemen, He's officially listed as a running back, Chandler Cox is, but he was a fullback for all intents and purposes. And the draft mentioned him; he was a fullback. So, and then Gaskin out of Washington, he's another running back guy. So, what do you think about doubling down in the backfield?
We talked about this a couple of podcasts ago, Lewis, when we talked about the draft coming up, and I told you they'd get a fullback either really late in the draft or they'd pick one up right away after the draft. And the advantages you have of using the fullback in today's NFL is that not many teams do it, so you can get really good fullbacks really late, and that's exactly what the Dolphins did. And the reason they did that was they had him graded. I actually heard that. I think it was Greer that said it, but they had him graded as the number one fullback available, and they just didn't want to risk him going after the draft and him signing with another team that might use a fullback, and so they just drafted him in the 7th round to get him. But I think they did pick up another free agent fullback possibly to give him some competition, but he should obviously be our fullback coming into the 2019 season, I would think. And I'm really excited to get one back because it's been since Lusaka Polite since we had one, and I used to remember how nice it was because he was automatic at getting those 3rd and 1 situations, always getting that first down. And so I'm really hoping that we finally have gotten past the Philbin and Gase days of when it's 3rd and 1 that we're throwing the football, and now we've got a fullback. Gaskins, it's so hard to judge a back, that late. He was very, very productive at Washington. So we're getting a guy that's had several seasons of real high productivity in college. And so he's coming into a team where I think he'll have a real good opportunity to be a special teams player and maybe, compete for that number 3 running back spot, on the team behind Drake and Balazs. So to get somebody in the 7th round that could potentially be a special teams contributor, to me is always a win.
Yep. Just for I know that somebody, I had said pretty much the same thing a little while ago, but somebody had mentioned to me Jaworski Lane. So I remember him too. He was good too. He wasn't Lusaka Polite good, but he was good too. So he's technically the last fullback we had, but the one we remember was Lusaka Polite. So all due respect to Jaworski Lane, I know he did his best, but.
Oh yeah, sorry, Jaworski. I think when Philbin showed up, that was the end of the fullback. So
yeah.
I love the fact that we've got a fullback because that is extra protection for Rosen, right, or whoever's back there. Mm-hmm. And traditionally, your fullbacks are very well trained for blocking for your quarterback, but also just that power run, like Chad said, in 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2. You just expect it, right? You just expect that the fullback's going to take it, and you challenge the other team to stop it. When you got those big guys back there and you just give them the rock and they're able to just push the pile ahead, that's exactly what you want. I mean, it feels like forever, and I know it's only been 8 or 9 years since we've had that fullback, but it's nice to have one back and to get one in the 7th round. And chances are this kid's probably gonna be starting, or he'll probably be in that starting rotation. I think that's huge value when you've got somebody who's going to, we anticipate will be contributing from day one. I love that.
All right, so now we've briefly gone through all the draft picks. Now let's talk about the Dolphins' undrafted free agents. So lots of guys there. I don't even think there's an official total list out there yet that I can look at. I can try to look at the Dolphins roster real quick and see if they listed them all. Let me see here. But there were a lot of guys who got picked up after, and this was the one thing that I want to say we can safely say Jeff Ireland was very good at. He was just at being able to find the acorns that are just hiding around everywhere. Let's see. I
do think you'll probably see a couple of them, maybe even 3 of them make the team. We haven't really seen much today because it just opened, but I honestly expect this team to probably sign 1 to 2 veteran offensive linemen yet. And they're still trying to figure out who are going to be their 3-4 type defensive ends, and those are usually guys that run around 280. or so. And so I know they picked up a couple of those free agents. It looks like a Dwayne Hendricks from Pittsburgh, as well as I know they got a guy from Georgia, Jonathan Ledbetter from Georgia. He's a 280-pound DN. So those guys will be getting an opportunity to play. They'll be competing against like Woodard on this team. And I expect them probably to sign another free agent or two probably at the DN, a larger size DN. I also expect them maybe to sign a 330-pound nose tackle type guy yet on the market. And there's some talent out there on the market right now that's just been sitting still to fill those.
I hear Ndamukong Suh is available.
Yeah,
we're already paying him.
Mo Wilkerson's available. I don't know, like where they're going to go with those guys. I know there's been some talk about Nick Perry maybe being an edge guy that they're looking at bringing in. But you'll see that it's not going to be huge deals, but you'll see them add some veterans along in there. And the fullback is Alec Ingold from Wisconsin. He's the fullback that'll be competing at the fullback spot. One guy to keep an eye on coming into camp, his name is Stone Wilson. He's a punter from FIU, it looks like. I only bring that up because I was just reading he was their all-time leading punter. And he'll probably
serious question, Chad. What stats do you have to do in order to be your leading punter? Like average yards per punt.
I assume I assume they're probably talking about what he averaged in yards.
Yeah.
But the other stat is number of punts you can put inside like the 10-yard line. I want to say, or the 15-yard line. I only bring it up because
Matt Hawk is
historically,
not good.
Not that he's not good. It's just. That's a lot of teams do that when you get a guy that's been there for a few years. You just do it from a salary cap standpoint, unless you've got a punter that's really, really good. Sometimes it's easier to go with a rookie. And I was just pointing him out as an unrestricted free agent that might make the team, has a chance to win a starting spot because he'll be really cheap to come in and compete with Hawk. And knowing the way the Dolphins coaching staff has been talking, it'll probably be an even up competition for those two guys. One final guy, there was a guy from, I want to say it was Rutgers, that was a linebacker.
Let me see. I found the Finsider has like a list of the players now. Let me see. Rutgers. Do you know his name?
I don't, but anyway,
New Mexico
I
State. Let's see. Trey Watson out of Maryland.
Oh, that's who it was. Trey Watson out of Maryland. Not right. Maryland, sorry. I was thinking Big Ten, but Maryland.
Okay.
I think he has I remember him watching him against the Iowa Hawkeyes. And I think he'll have a real chance to make the team as a special teams player. And finally, there's Preston Williams. I looked up him a little bit. He's from Colorado State, but he's had a troubled off-the-field issue.
Yes,
but,
very much so.
Very talented, physical guy. So he might be a guy that could sneak in on the practice squad or something like that based on his talent. But obviously he'd have to walk the straight and narrow in terms of the off-the-field stuff.
Honestly, with somebody like him, here's what I would honestly do is, do you remember that one year where it was announced that Des Bryant had like a chaperone?
Yeah.
For real. If Preston...
Yeah, I know. I don't know if you need an unrestricted free agent if he's going to get that convenience of getting a chaperone, but the guy's 6'4", he's pretty fast.
He's Devontae he's everything Devontae Parker would be, and more talent-wise and physically.
He's got the talent of a Devontae Parker.
He just needs to
Devontae Parker's never been trouble though.
Yes, that's why I'm saying you get him a chaperone and you make sure that he becomes what Parker was supposed to be.
Maybe.
Yeah, not for an undrafted free agent. Yeah, it's not going to work.
I'm only pointing him out as a guy that's got a lot of talent that's undrafted. So if he keeps his head on straight and he plays well, it's a guy that can make the team probably as a practice squad
right.
player.
People are treating him like a Josh Gordon type, but that's what I'm saying. Is like if he's a Josh Gordon type, then that means you need somebody to keep an eye on him. That's all I'm saying. If he's really that good and he has the potential to be that good, I'd do everything I can to make sure that my investment is protected.
Well, maybe that's a job they'll have available for you. Anybody looking for a job to be a chaperone?
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, that's those are the highlight ones I'd seen that maybe have a chance to make the team.
Ian, you haven't
So
said
I've
much.
got
Yeah,
one.
go ahead.
Yeah, and I do. I've seen a lot of news articles about Preston Williams, and I do think he's going to be one that sticks around, but he does have to stay on the straight and narrow path. And I'm of the belief that you don't, somebody who's brand new in the NFL, you don't get on the chaperone and you simply say, "Here's your chance, kid. You've worked all your life to be to this level, and you've got to be able to control what you do and make sure you stay out of trouble." And it's up to him to then be able to do it. If you're on a 5-year contract for $80 million, then maybe you get a chaperone because the team is so invested in you. But for him, there's no investment. But I do think he will eventually make the team as long as he stays out of trouble. And it might be on the practice squad for the first season or for the first half of the year, depending on how things go. And then you go from there. But I did hear something on the radio the other day about the offensive linemen, especially the backup offensive linemen. The Dolphins are really looking for offensive linemen that can work different positions, because obviously throughout the game you get offensive linemen that drop like flies at certain points, and they might take a couple plays off here and there and then come back in when they're feeling better. And I do see there's a kid out of Purdue, Kirk Barron. He's played in many different types of roles. He actually has a chance. He's got a shot to compete for a roster spot based on some of the news that I've read.
Wait, who?
His name is Kirk Barron out of Purdue. So
Kirk
somebody to
Barron.
keep your eye on. Kirk Barron. Yeah, undrafted. He does a really good job pulling outside zone, reaching 3-tech.
He got signed
downfield. So
he's on the Dolphins?
yeah, as an undrafted free agent. Exactly. Yeah.
I didn't see him. I didn't see that news report.
There's a whole pile of them. You're probably going to see a roster churning real in the next couple of days, because some of these guys probably won't stay. Not saying it would be him, but there'll be some of these guys will get cut for veterans. I'm just telling you guys right now, because you can only have 90, right, on your roster.
90 total in the
Correct,
offseason.
90. Yep.
So there'll be some now that they're able to sign veterans without losing compensation. There'll be some of these free agents that just are in as they're like 90, 89, 88, 87. They'll not probably get to stick around, but because we absolutely need some veterans on the offensive line for sure. I can't imagine our current offensive lines, what we're going into the season with, in particular now that we got Josh Rosen. You need to give him some semblance of a solid line. So I really expect us to pick up a veteran offensive tackle yet from somewhere. I don't know who's the best available, but
it probably would have been Veld here, but he's going to New England. Go figure.
Yeah, probably, there you go. So I don't know. But they won't necessarily be flashy names real well, but I just think we'll probably sign some guys that have been in the league for 3 or 4 years at least on the line yet. That'll be at bargain contracts probably. But some veterans to come in and compete with some of these younger unrestricted guys. Who'll be competing for those spots.
We'll see. I'm very much looking forward to seeing what these guys can do as OTAs comes up real quick. Mini camp and then training camp, which I will be once again sweating out there in the hot baking sun to go and bring all the coverage. But I don't know. It's going to be a very, very interesting season just based on the fact that this is not one of those last-minute playoff pushes. This is not one of those situations where we absolutely have to win. Nobody seems to have this level of urgency. Nobody seems to be stressing over what's going to happen. And there's a lot of directions that this season could go in, just based on all the different factors that you could throw in. Like, you could, if Rosen does well, if Rosen does not do well, if Rosen does somewhere down the middle, if the Dolphins win a few games, if the Dolphins lose all their games, there is no way to predict anything at this point. Like, at first we thought it was going to be an easy decision. Like, the Dolphins are not going to be good. They're going to draft Tua, and then next year they're going to see what happens from that point on. But they are now in such an interesting position, and there's so much young talent that can be developed, and now this coach who supposedly is built on developing talent and then figuring out what to do with it almost. I don't know. The whole New England angle that nobody wants us to mention anymore because everybody's tired of stop saying it's the New England way, which, like it or not, it is the New England way. That's where he's from. Like
Right.
if you don't think Matt Patricia in Detroit is trying to do things the New England way, then you're lying.
No, I'll say this though, for the glass half full part, the thing I'm looking forward to the most is with Josh Rosen. He'll have a new offensive system, and we'll have a young team in general. But we do only have one road game in the first 7 weeks of the season. One of those is a bye week, but we play our early games are all at home. Now that means the end of our season is brutal because we have a lot of road games. But if you're a young team and you're trying to get your young quarterback settled in to run your offense, there's almost no better scenario for you to get your first several games are all at your home stadium, so you're not having to deal with all the adversity of the away games early on. That's kind of a blessing in disguise if you're trying to develop a young team. One of the reasons why I think they'll probably be more like somewhere between 6-10 and maybe 9-7, somewhere in that range is where this team's going to finish. Because I think as we progress through that season, I do have some pretty good faith right now in our coaching staff. I think we have very good coaches, and I think you'll start to see a lot of these young players no longer be rookies when you start to get to week 7, 8, and 9, and now that we've been into a few months of the season and through training camp, those younger guys will start to I'm really hoping anyway to progress forward, and that's a perfect scenario to have your early games at home if you're trying to get some wins out of it.
Yep. So I guess that about covers it all. So we spent about an hour on Josh Rosen, and then we sucked up the last 22 minutes with every other player. I mean, I don't really feel bad about it because, again, the big story is Josh Rosen. We can maybe dig more in depth for the next show, see what we can do with all the other players, and see what we can kind of. Maybe what we can do next show is that we can kind of put together our own little our depth charts and see, like, based on what the Dolphins do. And we are gonna. I'm sure that we're gonna have some moves come tomorrow, just by the fact that, again, the deadline is going to be once midnight rolls around. The Dolphins and every other team in the league can start start picking free agents. They're going to start negotiating, making signings, and not going to have to worry about the compensatory picks. I actually got into a bit of a debate with Tom Shannon, who, by the way, Ian, is the one who wrote the story that you plugged earlier in the show, that the compensatory pick formula is only projected and that people don't believe that Juwan James is going to earn them a third-round pick just based on the Fitzpatrick signing. I don't agree with that. I think even Omar Kelly, while I was he basically said that he doesn't think they're going to get a third-round pick out of it either. But according to, I'm basing this off of the over-the-cap formula that is it's easy to find. Everybody can find it. It's the overthecap.com. It has its own little projected formula for what will happen as far as who and what gets compensatory picks. Everybody says that the Juwan James contract is going to be a third round comp pick for the Dolphins, so I'm going to stick with it until somebody tells me otherwise. So I am hoping that that's what happens, and now once midnight rolls around again, you don't have to worry. You can sign whoever you want, and nothing's going to happen. You get to keep it. So who knows? Maybe they bring back Ndamukong Suh after all, because now Gase is gone. It's Brian Flores, and we're already paying him a lot of money, so we might as well let him work for it, So anyway,
never know.
I wouldn't mind it. It'd be like, hey, if we're gonna pay you millions of dollars, you might as well work for it. Here you go.
I don't have any trouble, but it will be interesting. I think the question will be, is Sue somebody that will help your team develop over the next couple of years? I don't know if that's him or not.
Yeah,
but,
it's probably not. It's a nice hypothetical to think about, but
it's hard not to love the idea of Sue playing next to Wilkins. I mean,
that would be awesome.
But
well, and here's, if you know Sue based on everything you knew when he was with the Dolphins, before he was with the Dolphins, after he left the Dolphins, he's going to go whoever's going to pay him the most amount of money.
Well, apparently nobody wants to pay him a lot of money.
Be the Dolphins.
That won't be the Dolphins.
He's going to go with the best option.
I'm sure. Oh, I don't doubt it. That's why I'm saying I'm not really taking it seriously, but it's just like a what if. But
hey, he'll probably get 10 million. I'm guessing 10 to 11 million a year for a year or two from a team, kind of like what the Rams did. But
yes, we'll see.
one guy to keep your eye on, I think, is it Danny Shelton? I want to say his name was.
Yes, Danny Shelton. He's a nose tackle. He played with New England. He didn't live up to the hype. Let's say that. But
no, but Miami definitely could use a nose tackle type player.
Yes,
That's not what Wilkins is, not a nose tackle, and so that would be a potential guy to keep an eye on that Miami may bring in to fill that void for at least this season. So
I'd be on board with that. I mean, he's basically, this is going to be basically his second contract, right? Because the first one, he got drafted by the Browns, if I'm not mistaken. He didn't cut it with them. New England snapped him up because that's what they do. They take failed players from other teams and make them good. And I guess they decided Shelton was dispensable, so they just kind of went, you don't need to be here anymore.
They may send him yet too, but
that's true.
He's one of these players that just, I think New England's probably waiting too. They'll be active in the next few days too because they're probably picking up comp picks. So
yeah.
Now I think some of these players realize that there's the first free agency, and now the second free agency will start basically tomorrow with the comp picks passed. So there'll be teams that'll be willing to spend a little money now to kind of fill out their roster depth.
If you think about it, then there's 3 waves of free agency for real. There's 3 waves of free agency because then you have all the post-June 1st cuts.
Oh, right. Yep, that's correct. Yep. So that's true.
Who knows? Maybe that's Rashad Jones, like post-June 1st.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know. It's
I don't think
Rashad's going anywhere. To be honest,
I don't think so.
Maybe next year, but I think they'll keep him this year. I really do. So anyway, we'll see.
Anyway, so any final thoughts, gentlemen?
I'm just gonna say this is turning out to be a really exciting off season, and January 2nd, January 3rd, if you would have asked me if I thought it was going to be an exciting off season, I would have told you I thought it would be a boring off season. But things have turned around really, really quickly, and training camp cannot get here soon enough. That's all I got. I'm excited.
Same. I'm excited too. It's
and I'll make it 3. I'm excited. So, yep. So that's going to be it for this show. Next show, we'll try to, maybe that's what I think. I think we're going to go ahead and talk about what we would have as our depth chart just to see what would happen. And we'll try to, and as the news comes in, we'll react to it, see what happens. But anyway, that's going to be it for this show. Thank you all so much for joining us. And we will see you next time for another episode of the PhinManiacs.com podcast. Good night.